This is some stuff that'll improve your portfolio dramatically without you having to make new work. Take your portfolio to someone to get a portfolio review, but have them look for low-hanging fruit. And what you need from the person, first off, you need someone who hires designers or who has a say in hiring designers. Your friends can tell you whether your portfolio is as good as other ones they've seen. Maybe if your friend has had a lot of jobs and is really good at getting employed, they might be a good person to ask. But the best bet is someone who looks at portfolios and determines whether to bring that person in for an interview. So that is going to be creative people who influence hiring decisions. Everybody else is irrelevant. And what you want to do is either have someone give you like the most unfiltered portfolio review possible, or specifically ask them to go through and look for all the low-hanging fruit. And the low-hanging fruit is essentially every missed opportunity that seems obvious and every mistake, even if it's not a mistake, that feels like a typo. So for example, you got an event poster and it says June 3rd to July 5th, and it has a space, a dash, and a space instead of an N dash, or it has an M dash instead of an N dash. That's super low hanging fruit, but an experienced designer, especially a classically trained designer, meaning someone who went to a design program, they're gonna notice that. All that low hanging fruit, whether it's like a poster where the main type is great and considered, and the informational level type is really lazy use of Helvetica that signals very loudly you're terrible at type, or you don't care, or you don't know how to apply craft or concept to that low level stuff. That level of detail, that stuff matters, because what ends up happening is that the person reviewing your portfolio, to them it looks like a typo. And if you think about it, like if you have a paper, like a one-page paper, let's say, and it's got 2 or 3 typos, the person reviewing it, the average person, is more likely to point out the 2 or 3 typos than the substance of your work. So what you want to do is basically get rid of all those surface imperfections, so that when you're getting real portfolio reviews, you're getting the honest to goodness substance of it reviewed and acknowledged, and not that someone is pointing out, ooh, is that a double hyphen instead of an M dash? Like, you don't want that. When you're making work for other people and you're preparing to show it to other people, you want to assume the worst. You want to assume that they will be distracted by every double space after a period, every inconsistent anything, all of that kind of stuff. So there'll probably be 2 kinds of low-hanging fruit that come out of this. Actually, there's gonna be 3. The first is gonna be mistakes. Those are like your typos. The next one is gonna be missed opportunities. So this stuff is where the idea of width or depth in terms of a project comes through. So an example of missing depth might be that you were tasked with assigning a book cover. You weren't tasked with designing the back cover, but you want to design the spine and the back cover. That's a simple example of something that might add another hour or 2 to the project, but in the execution of it, it becomes much more rich. An example of that might be a width problem would be that the person looking at the portfolio is looking at this book cover and is like, the illustration style on this is amazing. This should be a series. You can almost count on that if one person is going to say something, someone else will say the same thing. Other examples will be expanding an idea into a campaign, or an identity system where the application feels too light for what it is. But someone who's used to reviewing portfolios, those details are going to stand out to them. And if you're specifically going after this low-hanging fruit idea, they're going to notice opportunities that aren't hard for you to expand. So we're not talking about reconcepting a idea in order to make a campaign. We're talking about looking at the DNA of what's there already and then expanding that to make one. The third type of low-hanging fruit is going to come from your storytelling. So this is things that you say that frame up what you're doing, and then the person seeing your portfolio is not seeing the thing that you're talking about. And that one is really helpful, because what ends up happening is you describe something and that person's expecting to see it. So people will say like, oh, this has a very modernist, minimalist aesthetic. But what they mean is clean or classical or spare. Now that might seem like a small distinction, but the thing is if you say modernist, it's gonna have a specific connotation. And if the person doesn't say it, it casts a little bit of doubt on your credibility, and it's a distraction because they're still waiting to see the modernist thing that you said was gonna be present in that work. And then the other one that is similar to that is the idea of a mistake that's not a mistake. So you present the work and then someone points out a thing that you're doing that's weird and wrong, and you actually meant to do that. What you don't want to have to do is explain or defend the decision after the fact. I'm a huge advocate of the only time you defend work is in an academic critique. The rest of the time, you take that little bit of information, because you shouldn't be just changing your work all the time just because people tell you to change it. There should be a rationale for why you would change it. So when someone points out something in what you're doing, like, oh, the colors are really garish and they're hard to read, and you're like, oh yeah, that's intentional. I mean, you could explain it, but the other thing is to file that away and recognize that when you were explaining the work, you forgot to explain one of the features. That garish color palette, that stretched type, that poorly bitmapped image, whatever, that you did that for a reason, and that's a feature of the work. So that's a strategy that will help you improve your portfolio really quickly, as well as get a higher quality of feedback. Having made this video, I'm almost inclined to say that it would be cool to do some portfolio reviews, but I'm a little bit sketchy about the investment that it would require. But if that's something that interests you, at least leave a comment or send me an email. Maybe it's doable. All right, take it easy.